If you've been chasing bullet hole tears and perfect arrow flight, this is the video you've been looking for. This isn't just another paper tuning video that tells you to move your rest and call it good. This is a complete guide, and we're going to cover every detail that you need to know. Having the correct starting point is crucial to going through this process efficiently and without frustration, so please do not skip this process. To start with the right foundation, we need to address these 5 things before we get started. Cam sync, rest position, rest timing, knocking point position, and knock pinch. You will want to start with your knocking point position 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch above perfectly 90 degrees to the center of the burger buttonhole. You can use a tool like the Easton knock square to find this correct measurement. Make sure that you're not getting any knock pinch by having the appropriate gap and serving size on your string for the knocks that you're using. For adequate spacing, I recommend at least 1 knock set on the bottom of the knock, or 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom, but not just 1 on the top. If you have just 1 on the bottom, it's going to push that arrow down into the rest. If you have 1 above and 1 below, you've got a fixed position with a fixed gap so that that knock isn't going to get pinched as you come to full draw. What happens if you have just 1 knock set above the knock, as you draw back, that is applying pressure to the top of the arrow, top of the knock, and that will lift the point of your arrow in your rest as you draw back, which can lead to inconsistency issues. With today's strings and the common knocks that are out there, this is a pretty uncommon issue, but it is crucial that you have this correct. Make sure that your serving size around your string is not too big for the knocks that you're using. A good rule of thumb is if you can pull the string up about 1 to 2 inches at rest and let go, the arrow should easily come off the bowstring. If it doesn't, you need to have your serving replaced for something smaller so the knock fit isn't as tight. Really, you just need that knock to be able to clip on the bowstring enough so it does not fall off your string as you draw back. Most of today's string and knock configurations should work perfectly fine. Once you set your knocking point appropriately, it is time to set your rest adjustment vertically. It's important that you start with the center of your arrow going through the center of your burger buttonhole. Now, it's completely acceptable to have the center of your arrow run through the top of the burger buttonhole as a starting point, but I would definitely not recommend having the center of your arrow go beneath your burger buttonhole, as you'll likely run into some clearance issues with your rests and your fletchings and even your sight just bottoming out on your sight housing. Now, I also wouldn't recommend going too far above the center of your arrow with the top of the burger buttonhole, as you start to get a little bit too far out of alignment for how the bows were designed to shoot. For the horizontal rest position, the best place to put your rest is the exact center shot measurement that the manufacturer provides for the specific bow model that you're shooting. For my Lift X, that is perfectly 13/16 of an inch. Note that some bow companies have a range for their center shot. Now, if that's the case, I recommend starting with the arrow as straight down the middle of the bow as you can visually see. That should be a very good starting point to get it closely aligned to the power stroke of the bow. Now that you have your beginning rest position set, it's important that you have the proper timing for your cable-driven or limb-driven drop-away arrow rests. For a limb-driven rest, where you have that cord attached on your limb will directly affect how long that launcher blade stays up before it falls out of the way from your arrow. Personally, if I'm using a limb-driven rest, I like to have that cord attached in the last 2 inches of the limb, and I've even ran it right on the axle of the cam and have had no issues whatsoever. It will always drop out of the way before that fletchings cross where that rest is at. For a cable-driven rest like the QAD, it is recommended that that rest comes up to the full upright position in the last 1 to 2 inches of draw. This is best measured in a draw board where you can see it come up in that last 1 to 2 inches. And it's best to have it set up this way so that there's not too much strain put on that cord pulling on your cables while you're at full draw. As a bow hunter shooting broadheads, it's important that you have your arrow spine in the correct range. This is easily found just by looking at an arrow chart, such as Easton's arrow chart, or even on the back of the arrow box to get you in the appropriate range. The arrow spine range that is acceptable for a modern compound bow shot with a mechanical release is very wide. A properly tuned bow can be shot with a wide variety of arrow spines and still be forgiving and accurate. Arrow spine can influence a tear through paper, but a well-tuned compound bow shot with a mechanical release can shoot almost any spined arrow straight. More times than not, arrow spine is not the cause of a bad tear through paper. Even if you go to a stiffer arrow and it fixes the tear, that's probably not the correct fix. It could just be masking the issue. With that said, if you're on the edge of being too stiff or too weak, go with the stiffer shaft and you will avoid most of the common issues when shooting broadheads with a weak shaft. So now for the discussion if we should use fletched shafts or bare shafts to shoot through paper and paper tune our setup. To be completely honest with you, shooting a bare shaft through paper can be very frustrating if you don't have absolutely perfect shooting form and very, very consistent arrows and nocks. Here's a quick test for me to show you why. Take a bare shaft and shoot it through paper at 10 yards. Notice the nock position on the string, and then take it again and clip it the opposite way on the string and shoot again. The difference from this one simple change alone should be enough to show you how frustrating this can be when there is nothing that changes other than how you nocked the arrow. Okay, so this test is showing what a difference it can make by just shooting a bare shaft through paper nocked one way and then nocked the other way. We tuned the bow in this bare shaft to get perfect bullet hole tears like this when it's nocked with that gold facing up and that tab on the nock facing in towards me. And then when I flipped it around, look at the tear differences I got just from knocking the arrow differently on the string. So this one reason alone should be enough to tell you why you probably shouldn't be trying to waste your time with paper tuning with a bare shaft arrow because there's a lot more other factors that go into that. You can use this method to help get your nock in the right position once your bow is already tuned, but this is not the way I recommend actually tuning your bow from this point forward. Now for the paper tuner. If you have a local archery club, there's probably a good chance that they have a custom paper tuner built like this one. Somebody from the club donated their time and made this paper tuner for every member here, and it's very convenient and easy to use. It's got even wheels, we can push it to and from the target. But if you don't have a local club, you don't want to go through the effort of making your own paper tuner, that's okay. You can use a ladder, a chair, a cutout cardboard box, anything that you could tape a piece of paper to and shoot through. You just have to be extra careful that you don't hit the edges of whatever it is that you're shooting with your paper attached to it, because as you make these adjustments, it could throw off your sight and where that arrow is actually flying. Now we're ready to shoot through paper, but how many arrows should we use and how far from the target should we shoot from? These are all factors that will make a difference with your paper tuning, so it's important that we get this right. Start at just 5 feet from the paper and shoot 5 arrows through the paper and assess the different results. You should see very similar tears with some slight differences. One of the most frustrating things about paper tuning is understanding if it's you, the bow, or the arrows. And I'll help tell you why, but for this point, it's very important that you look at all these tears and you choose one of your 5 arrows that has the most common or most consistent tear and use that for most of the remaining tuning for this paper tuning process. It's also important that you nock this arrow on the string the exact same way every time. Most plastic nocks have a slight little indicator on the side so that you can make sure if you're shooting a 4-fletch or fletchings with all the same color that you're knocking that nock exactly the same way, the same orientation on your string every single time. Once you choose this arrow, it's important that you shoot this arrow through paper again, and you should get the same tear. If you do, that's a great sign because it shows that you are consistent. If you don't, you have to take a step back and look at the bow didn't change, the arrow didn't change, so the only variable is you as the shooter. Quick tip, you can only tune a bow as good as you can shoot. If you are struggling getting inconsistent tears with the same bow, same arrow, you're getting different tears one shot to the next, it's probably something with your form as you're shooting, which can be easily fixed. But for now, if you have those problems, skip the rest of this video and go towards the end of the video where we talk about troubleshooting paper tuning, because a lot of this can be found with some slight variances with your grip, facial pressure, and a few other things that I talk about pretty in depth towards the end of the video that could get you on the path to tuning your bow to perfection. Now to the adjustments to make to correct the tear. Left, right, up, or down, or any variation in between. I'm going to show you what adjustments to make and in what order to do it in. Now for a high tear, you need to confirm that your cams are synced, doing so in a drawboard. If they are, you can slightly move your rest up or double check your knocking point position. Now for a low tear, you need to double check that your cams are in sync, and then you can slightly move your rest down or reevaluate your knocking point position. Note that arrow spine can change your tear, but arrow spine is not the cause of your bow not being able to tune if you're shooting a compound bow with a mechanical release. Arrow spine adjustments when tuning through paper are for archers that are shooting a compound bow with fingers, not a mechanical release. This is because when they're shooting fingers, that arrow has to flex around the rest as they shoot, which affects that arrow coming off left or right or even up and down as it's going through the paper. With a mechanical release aid in a modern compound bow, arrow spine is not the cause of these tears, and you can have almost any properly tuned compound bow shoot almost any variety of spine perfectly straight. For a left tear, if your arrow rest is perfectly center shot, put your bow in a press and move the cams to the left by pulling out the axle and adjusting the spacers. If your bow has yokes, tighten the left yoke if the bow has split yokes. If you have the ability to make a slight adjustment to both the top and the bottom cam, move them both equally. Matthew's limb shift technology makes this adjustment as easy as it gets because you don't need a bow press, you don't need to move spacers, and you don't need to adjust your rest. For a left tear, simply rotate the limb shift screw clockwise towards the L for left indicator, doing it evenly on both the top and the bottom cam. Now if you're shooting with top hats or spacers, it's advised to get these as close as possible before you must adjust your rest. If you must adjust your rest and you have a left tear through paper, slightly move your rest to the right towards the point of your arrow to help correct the tear. For a right tear, if your arrow rest is center shot perfectly, you can move your cams to the right or twist the right yokes on a split yoke bow, or if you've got the limb shift technology, you can twist it, your indicator to the right, moving that limb tip out to the right for both the top and the bottom cam. Again, with this limb shift technology, it gives you the ability to correct this adjustment with only an Allen wrench. No bow press is required to make the adjustment. Just remove the set screw and rotate the limb shift screw counterclockwise towards the R for the right tear indicator. No top hats, bow presses, or dropping E-clips or spacers on the floor required to make this adjustment. This is an absolutely genius move from Matthews and their engineering team. So if you have a combination of these tears, say high left, high right, low left, or low right, it's important that you fix the vertical tear first. If you don't do that, it could be masking the adjustments you make when you're making those horizontal adjustments, and you might find yourself chasing your tail to get the optimal tune out of your bow. For instance, a high or low knocking point could produce a left or right tear when really it's just a byproduct of poor vertical alignment between your knocking point and your rest. Now that you know the proper adjustments to make, the paper tuning process does not end there. One of the most common mistakes I see with bow hunters paper tuning is only shooting at one fixed distance. This is likely because most archers and bow hunters are paper tuning their bows in the store where the bow technician only has a short range to work and doesn't have the time that it takes to correctly paper tune your bow for you. Realize that paper tuning begins, not ends, at one distance. You need to shoot at multiple distances to confirm that you have proper arrow flight, starting at 5 feet and working your way out all the way to 15 or so yards. Move from 5 feet to 12 feet, and if your bow is still slightly out of tune, you should be able to see it better at 12 feet than you did at 5 feet because you were a little bit further back. If you have a tear that you can read, make the appropriate adjustment to fix the tear and do slightly less of an adjustment at 12 feet than you would have at 5 feet. Since you're further back, it takes less movement to have a bigger impact on how that arrow is coming out of your bow. Now, once you have this corrected at roughly 12 feet, it doesn't hurt to shoot again at 5 feet. The tear should be pretty darn close, but it does not have to be perfect. What does have to be perfect is your tears from roughly 12 feet to 15 yards. If you can get those as close to perfect as possible, you should have the straightest arrow flight from that distance on out. Once you have a bullet hole at 12 feet and you went back to 5 feet to do a quick double check, move back to roughly 7 or 8 yards, take the same arrow with the same nock orientation and shoot again. Don't be afraid to test your own consistency by shooting multiple shots in case you made a bad shot. Again, you can only tune your bow to how consistent you can shoot. Make any slight adjustments you need to at that 7-8 yards, and then proceed to back up to roughly 12 yards, and then finally to roughly 15 yards. For optimal arrow flight, forgiveness, and accuracy with broadheads, you should achieve perfect arrow flight from roughly 12 feet to 15 yards. Start close to the target and make the appropriate adjustments as you work your way back to ensure you've got perfect arrow flight. Once you think you have this, it does not hurt to double check all of the positions by shooting each distance with the same arrow just to confirm that that arrow is flying perfectly straight at every point during its flight path. Don't be worried if you have a slight variance in your tear up close at around 5 feet. This is common, especially if you have a slightly weaker reacting arrow coming out of your bow. This is because of how much that arrow is flexing. Really, what's most important is that that arrow is flying perfectly straight from 12 feet to roughly 15 yards. Once we've done this, we have officially paper tuned our bow, but we're not done yet. We've tuned the bow to one specific arrow, but what about the consistency amongst the different arrows? This is very important for bow hunters shooting any kind of broadhead, especially if you're using lighted nocks. Every arrow is different, and some react better or worse to this test than others, but what is important is that we go through this test and make sure each arrow is flying straight. This test is easy and only has to be done at one distance. I just do this at roughly 12 feet, and I just say 12 feet as a reference. It doesn't have to be perfect. Shoot your first arrow, which should be a perfect bullet hole since that is the arrow that you tuned with. Shoot the remaining arrows left to right and keep track of them in order so that you can keep track of the tears and the arrow that made them. You should quickly realize the importance of picking just one arrow to initially paper tune with, as one or two or potentially all of the other arrows could have a slightly different tear than the arrow that you tuned with. Now, don't worry, you don't need a spine tester to be able to fix this problem. Simply give your arrow a third turn or a quarter turn, depending on if you're shooting a 3 or 4 fletch. And usually by doing this, I can go from having 3 or 4 arrows flying straight out or straight through paper to having almost the full dozen, with maybe the exception of one that I can't get to fly straight coming out of my bow. Now, I do usually have one, sometimes two, that no matter how I turn the nock, I cannot get them to tune perfect through paper. So that tells me that there's some kind of inconsistency there in the shaft, but it could also be the nock. So I also just replace the nock to double check it, just in case that's the issue. There it is. That fixed it. In my experience, this is especially true when shooting lighted nocks. This is extremely important because the only time most people are shooting lighted nocks is when they're shooting a broadhead at a live animal. So it's important that you do this test to make sure that you have the proper nock alignment with your arrows to have them flying as optimal as possible for you and your setup. Now for the most common issue with paper tuning. That is having an inconsistent grip. Consistency is key when it comes to everything archery, but when it comes specifically to tuning and arrow flight, grip is one of the most important factors. We all torque our bows. The cable guard here pulling the cables out of the way so that our arrow has clearance to shoot is inducing torque in the system. The differences between how we grip our bow and the pressures against the grip can also affect how that bow is twisting in our hand as we come to full draw. There is a right and a wrong way to grip your bow, but what is most important is that you are consistent doing it. As long as you are consistent and can do it exactly the same every single time, we can almost always tune for it. Now for troubleshooting. If you're going through this process and you're having a few issues and you're not sure what's causing these issues or these inconsistencies, check these key things that are probably the most common issues that could be giving you bad results. Number one, are you using the same arrow for the initial paper tuning process? It's very common that people are shooting multiple different arrows, chasing different tears from different arrow reactions shot to shot. They think it's them as the archer, when in all reality, it is actually the differences arrow to arrow or nock to nock. Troubleshooting mistake number two. Are you shooting with a consistent, relaxed bow grip? Bow grip is the biggest factor with getting a consistent paper tear, hands down. And that is the most common issue I see from person to person with all of the different people I've worked with setting up and tuning their bows. Number three, is your D-loop too short for your release? If you're shooting a handheld release and that D-loop is too short, when you come to full draw and twist your hand into anchor, it could be twisting your string at full draw, which could be causing some different tensions and different inconsistencies shot to shot. I recommend a D-loop length of roughly 3/4 of an inch to prevent this issue altogether. This ties in to number four for troubleshooting, which is having a consistent rotation of your hand if you're shooting a handheld release at full draw. If one shot you have your release hand straight up and down and the next one it's almost flat, that could be giving you different results shot to shot to shot. So it's important that that remains the same. The last one I'll mention is probably the least common, but it definitely does happen, especially if you're at higher percentage let-offs like 85% or higher, and that is excessive face pressure. If you have excessive face pressure where that string is burying into your cheek or really pressing hard against your nose or even catching on your beard, on your face, that could be giving you inconsistent results, leading to really bad tears through paper or just even inconsistent tears through paper. Again, inconsistent bow grip is the number one cause of inconsistent tears through paper. If you want to dial in your bow grip and make it as consistent as possible, be sure to go back and check out our Learn Archery video on how to correctly grip your bow. So is paper tuning really the end be all tuning method that you should be worried about? Really, it depends on what you want to achieve. If you're a bow hunter looking for the most consistent arrow flight possible with your broadheads, this is a darn good starting point to get you as close as possible. Any slight tweaks that might be needed to get you to finish your broadhead tuning can be done to achieve optimal flight, but this is the best path to get you there without leading you down a road of frustration that is all too common with broadhead tuning. If you are looking for more information on broadhead tuning, be sure to check out our complete guide to broadhead tuning video, linked in the description below. So if you're a target archer only, is paper tuning important? Honestly, no. I know several professional archers that specifically tune for a high left tear so that that arrow comes out of their bow the exact same every single time. Whereas if they ran it so that that arrow was coming out perfectly straight, it leaves more room for slight variation and slight error based on slight hand and grip inconsistencies, shot inconsistencies, where that arrow could veer a little left, veer a little right. If it's tuned to be a high left tear, it will always be a high left tear, which could lead to more consistency with your shot as a target archer. This is obviously not the route to go if you're a bow hunter shooting broadheads of any type. With that said, there are some tuning and setup techniques that can give you more forgiveness for your setup, regardless if you're a target archer or a bow hunter, that I cover in our Ultimate Bow Build Masterclass online course. If you're curious about that, be sure to check it out. If you watch this entire video, you should know everything you need to do to paper tune today's modern compound bows. With that said, if you still have questions, please comment them below or shoot me a direct message, and I'll be happy to do what I can to help you. If you like this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, comment below, let me know what you liked, and as always, appreciate you guys following along. I can't wait to see you on the next one.